Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, Jesse with the Common Nerd, bringing you pop culture and all things 33 common sense lens. And well, we kind of already knew that Snow White's box office was going to be a disastrous dumpster fire, right? Like the early projections were absolutely horrible, and with the reported budget anywhere from $270 million all the way up to potentially even $370 million, and that's been reported by some of the trade magazines out there, right? That's not like our general rumor mill. I mean, this movie was basically destined to fail. This movie has to make $1 billion at the box office globally in order to even come close to sniffing a profit. We've done the math. We've said you can go back and watch our other videos where we've talked about that and prove that mathematically. Well, boys and girls, it looks like its second weekend drop, percentage-wise, might not seem so bad, but it is guaranteed to make it to where this movie is doomed for absolute failure, and there will be no way to deny it whatsoever, with Disney literally throwing Rachel Zegler right under the bus and passing the buck onto her and blaming her for absolutely every aspect of it, even though they are the ones that decided on the CGI dwarves. They're the ones that picked her. They're the ones that hired her. They're the ones that rewrote the story. Needless to say, all of the blame is falling on her, but at the end of the day, we know that there is plenty of blame to go around for what does absolutely end up being a hundreds of millions of dollars of loss at the Walt Disney Company, all because they bet on a diversity, inclusion, and equity version of Snow White, and guess what? It is now blown up in their faces completely, because as you can see over here from the headline from thatparkplace.com, Snow White box office projected to drop 53% in second weekend, and that's a lot worse than it sounds. And we've talked about this in the past, boys and girls, before. You know, a good drop is 50 to 60%, right? And anything from a 60 to 70% drop isn't really out of the unusual possibility realm, and anything worse than that is absolutely abysmal. But the problem with this, we know how Disney's Snow White live-action remake box office started out. So needless to say, a 50% drop pretty much guarantees this movie will absolutely end up being a flop and a disastrous dumpster fire at the box office. Why is that the case? Well, we're going to check out this article from thatparkplace.com, getting all of the juicy details and lay it out for you in an argument that simply cannot be denied if you're a reasonable, rational person in any way, shape, or form and not one of the acolytes of the cult. But before we do, if you do enjoy our content, hit that like button, share with all your friends, and subscribe or follow if you have not already, boys and girls, because we are grinding, we are growing. We just crossed 1,700. We're on our way to 1,800, and I could not do that without every single one of you. Also, leave us a comment in the section down below. Let me know what do you think about this. Does it surprise you at all that Disney's disastrous dumpster fire of the live-action remake of Snow White has turned into so abysmally bad at the box office? Do you think it's because of the premise of the whole movie right from the get-go, or do you think Rachel Zegler is the main content of that, or do you think it's a little bit of a mix of both? Do you think there's any way and chance that this movie has any kind of legs going forward? Let us know what you think about all that in the comment section down below. And if you'd like to support the channel, please check out the links in the description as well. All right, from thatparkplace.com and our dear sweet Montanero. You might have seen the headline. Disney's live-action Snow White is projected to drop 53% in its second weekend at the box office. To the untrained eye, that might not sound like a disaster. Blockbusters drop 50% all the time, right? But here's the truth. When your movie opens soft, and that's being generous in this case, yeah, no, it opened to a disastrous dumpster fire. A 53% drop isn't just a stumble. It's doom with good lighting. I love that. It's doom with good lighting. Let's talk numbers, because Disney hopes you won't. Snow White, starring Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot, opened at just $42.2 million domestically, and a number that already fell well below expectations. Yeah, initially it started out with the expectations were like $50 to $60 million. Then as we got closer and closer to the movie being released, they got dropped down. They said mid-40s. They were hoping for a $45 million opening weekend. Yeah, couldn't even do that. The international box office came in under $100 million, boys and girls. That is insane for a Disney live-action movie. I mean, Little Mermaid did way better than this, and that was with a very glaring, obvious race swap in the lead of that. The movie still lost money, but it still did better than Snow White. And now, according to Forbes and Deadline, the film is projected to earn just $20 million in its second weekend. That means it's on track to gross about $70 to $75 million in 10 days. Even with the most optimistic projections, Disney's latest remake will be lucky to hit $100 million domestically for a film that reportedly cost $250 to $270 million to produce. And that's the other thing about it too. This thing has consistently come in under estimates, right? So there's no reason not to think that second. These trade magazines have really been trying to hold water for this movie as best they could. They're trying to not not blame Rachel Zegler for all of this because, of course, they believe all of the exact same crazy cult things that she does. But, of course, Disney had to switch the narrative because they don't want to take the blame for it. They want to pass the buck just like every other coward out there in Hollywood. So color us shocked there. But needless to say, this thing could easily come in under that 50% estimate. And if it ends up at like a 60 to a 70%, that means this movie will never hit $100 million domestically. And there's a good possibility it might not even hit $200 million globally. And that would be insane. That would be worse than the Marvels, boys and girls. And that is considered one of the biggest disastrous dumpster fires in box office history. And guess what? This movie's tracking worse than that. And that's before marketing, talking about the budget. And that's not underperformance. That's box office implosion. When a film opens up with $150 million and drops 53%, it's a minor dip. When a film opens with $42 million and drops the same percentage, that's a different story entirely. Because, yeah, think about it. $150 million, basically take half of that. You're talking $75 million, right? It's one of them situations, yeah, $75 million. That's a good addition if you open with $150 million, right? That puts you over the top of $200 million. That puts you like 210, 215. Right? But when you started out at 40 million and then you're going to come in with 20 million, that's only 60 million weekend over weekend. And it's just going to keep on dropping from there and there and there. And yeah, you just work the math out a little bit, boys and girls, and it probably won't crack $100 million domestically. That's insane. So here's the uncomfortable reality Disney wasn't want you to focus on. A 53% drop from a weak base is potentially just as bad, if not worse, than a 70% drop from a strong one. It's not the size of the percentage, it's where you're starting from. Don't forget that, boys. Don't forget that. It's not about the percentage. It's about where you're starting from. But I mean, seriously, like legitimately, that's abysmal. That's bad because, yeah, you start off really big. Well, a big drop's not near as big a deal because you're still raking in a crap ton of money. But when you start out this small, yeah, you ain't going to go anywhere. The Marvels dropped 78% in its second weekend. Snow White is following a very similar trajectory, just in slow motion. The signs are all there. Weak opening, soft legs, cultural apathy, pre-release controversy, and no major overseas support on the horizon. Like we talked about earlier, the international box office is doing horribly bad. It is not good at all. And that's what it comes down to, boys and girls. We talked about this in the past as well. Every single trailer for this movie got ratioed into oblivion, and it wasn't even close. I mean, ever since she opened up her mouth and talked about, wow, the original classic, it's kind of outdated, and it's weird. We're not going to have a stalker story with this prince, and I'm going to be my own strong independent woman and yada yada yada. Well, guess what? It's just all been downhill from there. This is a slow motion flop, padded by an empty theatrical calendar and propped up by brand inertia. That number one spot it's holding on to, that's not dominance, it's a funeral procession. Because literally, there's nothing out there in any way, shape, or form. And honestly, if you go back to like some of the Monday and Tuesday numbers from just this last week, Snow White's not even number one on those dailies. Like, it's literally like not even in the rankings at all. Nobody's going to see this during the week. Let's not forget that Snow White's performance isn't happening in a vacuum. It follows months of backlash, much of it sparked by Rachel Zegler's repeated efforts to frame the film as some kind of cultural crusade, from calling the original prince a stalker, yada, yada, yada. And audiences noted. Now, Variety reports that Disney also panicked. They're throwing Rachel Zegler under the bus for absolutely every piece of that. And this is what we've talked about in the past. We've done plenty of videos over this. You guys know about all this kind of stuff, all that kind of stuff, all the crazy things that Rachel Zegler said, and literally alienated over half the population in the United States, boys and girls. Snow White isn't flopping because of review bombing or some coordinated conspiracy, because literally all of the trade magazines, the critic score is abysmal as well. And if you go to the top critic score, it's like 27%. Even the legacy media institutions hate this movie. So guess what? I don't think the critic score is getting review bombed by a bunch of angry racist fans. Now is it? No, I didn't think so. So it's flopping because Disney made a film that dismissed its roots. It mocked its fans and wrapped itself in divisive commentary, and then expected families to pay $15 a ticket for a lecture. Yeah, not gonna happen. Now is it, boys and girls? If we want a lecture, we'll deal with our wives. Worse, it's flopping from a budget of $250 million before marketing and global distribution costs are factored in. You don't walk away from that kind of loss with a shrug. You walk away with a bloodied spread spreadsheet and a lot of awkward shareholder meetings. Oh, I can't wait. I pray to the Lord in heaven that somebody brings up Snow White during the next investors call, although it'll probably just be done through an AI voice because apparently they don't trust anybody to actually call in and ask them real questions because it always ends up putting egg on their face. But needless to say, explain this one to your investors, Disney. Well, it's all Rachel Zegler's fault and we couldn't control her. It's not our fault. Don't blame us. So, yes, a 50% drop may sound survivable for movies that aren't Snow White. When you're starting at the bottom of the hill, there's not much room left to fall. Snow White isn't just falling, it's proving once again that audiences don't want billion-dollar corporations to act like cultural gatekeepers. They want good stories, and Snow White didn't deliver. And that's an absolute fact. I love this. Final thought, the cliff isn't ahead. Snow White already fell off it. And yes, with the absolute abysmal opening weekend that they had, this movie had never had a chance to make a profit in any way, shape, or form. Rachel Zegler is an insufferable twat waffle, and a lot of the other people involved with this were as well. The whole premise behind this story and changing everything up and initially going with 7 homeless people from San Francisco instead of 7 actual real-life dwarf actors, and then instead of doing that, once again screwing over the entire dwarf community out there and going with CGI instead of hiring real actors in your allegedly live-action remake, it literally makes no sense. It was absolutely insanity from the get-go, and all of her comments between trying to divide the population, trying to make everything about politics, and of course, putting this kind of nonsense on stuff that she's getting made to promote, she decided to inject her own identity politics into that. So of course, Disney's mad. They threw her under the bus. But at the end of the day, Disney has just as much to blame about this movie failing than it does for Rachel Zegler. They're just trying to pass the buck so that way they can tell their investors it's not our fault, it's all hers. If it wasn't for her being so insufferable and such a twat waffle that we hired, this movie would have done great. Yeah, no, boys and girls, we all know better. Little Mermaid did not have anywhere near the kind of controversy this did because Halle Bailey was a lovely, beautiful woman that was very sweet to the fans and the audiences and did nothing but good PR for this movie. And that movie made $500 million globally and still ended up losing money. Rachel Zegler, on the other hand, has been an insufferable twat waffle for a very long time, and fans, even the pixie dusters out there, cannot stand her. You disrespect literally the movie that saved the Walt Disney Company and made it profitable going forward. Well, guess what? Disney fans aren't going to enjoy that very much. And clearly, no one is enjoying this movie at the box office because now with this second week estimated drop, which will probably end up being worse, there is no denying the fact that Snow White live action remake from our dear sweet friends over there at Disney starring Rachel Zegler is an absolute flop. It has lost money and it will continue to lose. Snow White's box office is doomed, and guess what, Disney? You ain't got nobody to blame but yourself. Dance with the devil, you're bound to get burned, and this burn cost you hundreds of millions of dollars. I hope you've learned your lesson.